Hi, this is Fatima. Here let us see the introduction to EntityFrameworkCore. Before proceeding to this video, watch my previous video where we have discussed about select list validation in asp.NET Core. We can also call the EntityFrameworkCore as a EF code. This is a complete rewritten from the ground up. If you have any experience with the previous versions of Entity Framework, then we will find a lot of familiar features with this. This EF code is Microsoft's official data access platform, and it is lightweight, open source software and cross-platform, so it works on Windows, Mac OS and Linux, etc. And this EF code is extensible and it is an ORM. ORM is nothing but Object-Relational Mapper. It enables us to work with the database using business objects. As a developer, we work with the application's business objects, and this ORM generates the SQL that the underlying database understands. In short, we can say that this eliminates the need for most of the data access code that we need to write. Let us understand the use of the ORM. If you are developing an application to manage the order, we would have the classes like the product, customer, etc. in our application code. These classes are nothing but the domain classes. Without the ORM like this EF code, we have to write a lot of custom data access code to store and retrieve the product and customer from the underlying database. For example, to read, insert, update or delete data from this underlying data table, then we have to write the code in the application to generate the required SQL statements that the underlying database understands. Also, when the data is read from the database into our application, we again have to write the custom code to map the database data to our model classes like products, customer, etc. This is an ORM like EF code sits between our application code and the database, can do all this for us and saves a lot of time. It eliminates the need for most of the custom data access code that we usually have to write without this ORM or EF code. This EF code supports many relational and even non-relational databases by using a plugin libraries. We can call it as a database provider. These database providers are available as the NuGet packages. The database provider usually sits between EF code and the database it supports. So it contains a functionality specific to the database it supports. The functionality that is common to all the database is in this EF core component, and the functionality that is specific to the database is present in the database provider. You can see here the list of EF Core database providers. For example, the Microsoft SQL Server specific functionality is within this SQL Server provider or EF Core. We will discuss more about this in our upcoming video. EF Core supports code first approach as well the database first approach. However, with the database first approach, there is very limited support in the EF Core at the moment. This code first approach, we first create our application domain classes like product, customer, etc. and the special classes that derives from the entity framework, that is DB context classes. Based on this domain and the DB context classes, EF Core creates a database and the relevant tables. And this EF Core uses its default convention to create the database and the database tables. We can also change these default conventions if we want to. At some cases, we may have the existing database. If we have the database and the database tables already ready, we may go for this DB first approach. With this approach, EF Core creates a domain and the DB context classes based on the existing database schema. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let us see how to install the EntityFrameworkCore in our next video. Thank you.